this shit in your life.
Y'all already know what time it is. Isom #1 from Rippaverse Comics has officially dropped. Written by Eric July, line work by Cliff Richards, and colors by Gabe El Taib. It's an all-star cast today, so let's not waste any more time and jump right into it. But first, I do want to note that a lot of coverage about this book has revolved around Eric, his YouTube, his politics, and certain stances on social issues. But this video is going to be dealing strictly with the book itself. We're also going to keep things relatively spoiler-free. If you've seen the Isom trailer, which is where the opening bit of this video came from, then you already know a little bit about the opening of the story. I won't be giving away anything that wasn't revealed in that trailer, aside from discussion about a few specific panels. But in terms of plot points, this video will be spoiler-free, so you can watch it in its entirety and still fully enjoy the book, whether it's on its way or you have yet to order a copy. I will be doing a spoiler review at a later point, and I'll elaborate on that a bit at the end of the video. But for right now, let's go and dive right into Isom. This is the first thing I've covered on Unsigned Hype that's exclusively released in physical format. What you see on the screen here does not do the book justice at all. The art is firing on all cylinders, and the colors jump right off the page when you're reading it up close and personal. I am curious as to why Eric chose to forego the digital option. It could have been a strategic move on his part, and I would highly recommend getting the physical copy even if there was a digital version available. But I do know that for some folks, the lack of a digital option is going to raise the bar of entry above what they may be comfortable with. Hopefully, if any of those folks are watching this video, I can convince them to pick up a copy. But what about the story, I hear some of you asking. Eric and his team have been very tight-lipped about the contents of the plot and character arcs in the story, and with good reason. Eric has said himself, "You don't tell what you can sell," or something to that effect. I know a lot of folks would love for him to have elaborated more on what's going on inside the book, but he's already done that. Again, watch that Isom trailer. He speaks at great length about the contents of the plot, at least things that you'll be picking up on the first few pages of the book. If he had said anything more, he would have gone right into spoiler territory. As I said earlier, I'm not going to be breaking down the plot here. That'll come later, which I'll elaborate on later. Bear with me. But if you're totally new to Isom, it's basically a story about a former superhero whose real name is Avery Silman, who's living a quiet life out on his ranch in Texas, following a mysterious event that caused him to hang up the tights. He's brought back into the life of sorts when his sister Altona asks him to look into a missing persons case after a family friend named Jasmine has been missing for a week. The prime suspect is an old friend of Avery's named Darren, who's come up in life since the two palled around back in grade school. He's a big name in the city, both in the spotlight and the criminal underworld. Without getting into spoilers, I can definitely say that I love this premise already. Writing an origin story is one thing, but a re-origin story? Now that takes some serious skill, because you're essentially writing two origin stories. Plus you have to give readers a good reason for why the protagonist got out of the game in the first place. The jury's still out as to whether or not Isom will deliver on that front, but I'm liking what we got so far. This issue mainly focuses on introducing us to Avery, the people who matter to him, and the world he inhabits. It does look like a very intriguing world, and what superhero universe would be complete without some folks having a little something extra? Marvel has mutant powers, among many other things. My Hero Academia has quirks, and the Rippaverse world has excepts, aka superpowered people. Where do they come from? How do they get their powers? No idea, but I'm sure we'll find out in issues to come. And we actually meet a few excepts in this issue. The first one we meet right off the bat is the blonde bombshell Yaira, who's taken the fandom by storm and is damn near more popular than Isom himself. Avery's encounter with her is easily one of the highlights of this book. We also meet the Alpha Corps, a trio of heroes that seem to be part of some government or law enforcement unit. And at the very end, we're teased to one more group that's definitely gonna stir things up in the Rippaverse. really hype about these guys. They may just be the most unique characters introduced so far. Also, I do need to reiterate here, this is only issue 1. If you're expecting a lot about the characters' backstories and lore, you're looking in the wrong spot. And I'm glad Eric didn't bludgeon us with a massive info dump. There are a handful of panels that do get a little heavy on the exposition side, but it never takes you out of the story. Plus, it's a superhero comic. Expecting zero exposition in a superhero comic is like expecting zero mid-fight monologues in a shonen anime. Getting back to Avery for a second, he's a very complex character from the looks of things. He has his strong suits as well as his faults. I think we learn everything we need to know about Avery right here in this issue, which is the job of every first issue / episode, etc, etc. I have a good idea of what he values as a person, what his biggest flaws are, as well as his strong points. We see how he interacts with people he loves and respects, like his sister Altona, and I gotta say I really like their dynamic. They're like a adult version of Virgil and Sharon from Static. You can tell they're really close, and some of the best scenes in this book are their exchanges. We also see how Avery deals with challenges, particularly ones dealt in a disrespectful way. This probably leads to about 90% of the fights in the book, so that should tell you a good deal about Avery all on its own. All in all, this book is a solid first issue, but like any first issue, there are some areas for improvement. I think the length of some of the talking scenes could be shaved down a bit. It never gets too wordy, but on a couple pages it does swerve into the talking head territory. You kind of get this feeling of, okay, I get it, let's get back to the good stuff. And I understand, this issue isn't just the beginning issue of Isom, but it's the launching point for the entire Rippaverse itself. So there's a lot of moving pieces that have to be set up so that they'll have payoff later on. We got future characters, story arcs, entire plot points, all that have to be assembled right here in the foundation. So I was expecting things to be a little heavy on the talking side, but now that we're past issue 1, I hope that going forward, we can cut down a bit on the exposition and the lengthy exchanges. Speaking of the dialogue, it does get stilted from time to time and honestly kind of reads unnaturally here and there. I don't know if this was intentional on Eric's part. I mean, I know he's a longtime comic head, so he may be intentionally trying to evoke dialogue from an older era of comics. If you've been reading comics for more than 2 decades, then you definitely know what I'm talking about, where people would talk in a more fantastical way, versus modern comic writing, which tries to nail down the more natural sound. Now, if this was intentional, then no harm, no foul. But if it wasn't intentional, then I think Eric and his creative team could stand to run the dialogue through the ironing filter a couple more times for the next issue. And there's even a couple panels where it's not even due to stylistic choice. I can only chalk it up to editing error. There's one panel in particular where Avery and Altona are having a conversation after some serious shit goes down, where she says the same exact thing in 2 speech bubbles. Hopefully stuff like that doesn't keep repeating itself, because it really made no sense. Lastly, in terms of critiques, while I generally love the action scenes here, there were a couple panels where the characters felt kind of stiff. Less like snapshots of people in motion and more like people posing for a picture. These panels are few and far between, thankfully, but hopefully as the series goes on, they'll reduce in numbers all the way down to 0. But even with these critiques, I'm no less hyped for the next issue. I can't wait to see where the story goes and how the characters grow. Super solid first issue, so big shout out to Eric July and the entire Rippaverse team for knocking it out the park. The hype was not in vain. And before I get out of here, I do want to touch back on my whole spoiler video thing, because I know there are some folks who just want me to dive into the meat and potatoes of the book. For those people, I am going to do a spoiler review that'll come out either later this week or early next week. But there's a catch. It's going to be a members only video. So if you are interested in anything of that nature, if you want to talk about the spoilers, you want to talk about the story, you want to go in and you just want to dive in and chop it up, then you can become a channel member. And for just $2.99 a month, you'll also unlock all the previous live streams. If you look through my videos, you see where the live streams go. Well, they become members only after about a month, with the exception of a couple. I give you my Denzel Washington guarantee you will not regret it. And that's gonna be all for me today. Thank y'all for watching and listening. I'm Anime, and I'll talk to y'all later. Deuces.